Oh, okay.
All right, I think we're recording.
Sorry? Okay, so we're recording now.
We've got.
Okay.
We're recording now, John.
We are recording
I
now.
should have brushed my hair or something.
Don't worry about it, Rasputin.
Is it okay if I finish? Is it okay if I finish my dinner at the same time?
Just be natural, just whatever, how it comes.
Okay.
It's about what you say is fine.
Okay.
But actually, Seydi, Trevor's not here today, so anyone watching, we've got a bit of a time difference because we're recording between the UK, America, and China. So it's a bit too early for Trevor. He's not here. You're lucky because today we've got the one and only Mr. Seydi, who's actually still in Hangzhou in China at the minute, recording live. So Seydi, perhaps it's an idea that you can introduce yourself. Just tell everyone a bit about yourself quickly, how you ended up in China and what you do.
Okay, so I've been studying sports for about 10 years or more, and I met my wife in France because I'm French.
Yeah.
We ended up moving to China after I finished my studies in France. Then we have been in China for now 9 years. And I started with an internship over there, then 1 job, 2 jobs, and I started freelance, started my own company after about 3 years, 4. So it's been a journey of entrepreneurship for me for the past 5 years, 6 years in Hangzhou.
Yeah, so you own a sports company, right? So essentially, it's largely American football. Is that right? That you're teaching, or different sports now?
Yes, it is. Go Hawks! Seattle Seahawks. Go Hawks!
Go.
So it is American football, and we did some football, soccer at some point, even some floorball, but we're back to just American football right now, especially with the after the outbreak.
Yeah.
We are focusing on the one thing that we're better at, and yeah, this is what we do now. All ages we start. Sorry.
Business is quite good though. You say at the minute, everything's going well.
It's okay. Could be better always, but we managed to survive the outbreak for like a few months. We didn't know where everything was going, and we kind of managed to just keep at it, and we had to innovate as well because some of the things we started doing, some things we didn't do before, just because of the situation here. I'm talking about like one-on-one classes with students, things like this. We never did this before, and that gave us the how would you call that? Thanks to that, we were able to keep on going for some time.
Yeah.
Because all the business in schools, everything was shut down.
Yeah, it's dry.
So yeah, so we had to try new things and just keep on recruiting people, students to join. And with the summer camps, everybody's no one can move out of China right now. So a lot of people were, registered for the camps.
Yeah.
So it's good for us.
Yeah, some of
definitely.
the camps look like it's going to do well. So you've been in China for 9 years, right? And you've got a family there as well. So you've got young Nolan. And I forget, Nolan's 5 now. Is he 5 or 4?
He just turned 5 a few days ago. Yeah.
Right. Happy birthday, Nolan, if you're there.
Yes,
so, all 3 of us are now are married. I'm kind of 50% married anyway in China with a Chinese wife, and I was actually just on the phone to her before we took this call, and she'd been speaking to her mom, and I said, did your mom ask about me? What's she asking about England? And I'm trying to get her mom to start using my name, like just to break it down into Chinese, like Chao-ne-sen, like how to say my name, but she still
Oh.
refuses to kind of say my name. She calls
Okay.
me. She doesn't speak Putonghua, which is Mandarin. She speaks her local dialect, which is basically Cantonese. So she just refers to me as Naganing, which is basically foreigner in her local language, which is like,
Okay.
okay. It's a little, it's a bit funny, right? But I mean, it's been going on for a few months now, and I don't think it's going to change. I think I'm always going to just be called the foreigner, basically, to the family. Who knows? It might change. So I think this week we wanted to talk a bit really about our personal experiences, about how you can be treated in China as a foreigner, and really where this comes from, and how the Chinese can sometimes view themselves. They can be quite homogenous, shall we say, where it's very much China first, and everyone comes second. How about I start with Lewis then first, and some of your experiences, Lewis. And Lewis, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. Just a minute, sorry. Just trying to change the Wi-Fi so I've got a better signal.
That's fine. Did you hear what
I'm trying to charge my phone? Okay, charging now.
Sorry, could you ask that again, John? I missed that.
I was saying I think we should start with some of our personal experiences about how you think you get you feel that you're treated differently as a foreigner in China, whether they're positive or negative, and if this affects us on a day-to-day life.
But I think for me personally, and I think it's the same for a lot of people like me, when you first arrive in China, and you arrive there considering yourself a foreigner. So the fact that everybody just points at you and calls you a foreigner doesn't really bother you, because it's like you're on holiday, right? Yeah, I'm a foreigner. Isn't this funny? Aren't they weird for pointing at me? It often works to your benefit. I've been in situations where you play the foreigner card, pretend you don't understand any Chinese, and you can get some preferential treatment, whether it's buying tickets at the train station where they'll let you use they'll have like a window for English language, but usually the person there still doesn't actually speak any English. But you can kind of like, sometimes you can, it's supposed to be like for, sort of preferential treatment. So basically you can sometimes get away with things like not queuing up for as long as the Chinese have to, or I don't know, off the top of my head, I can't think of specific examples, but there are lots of little situations where being a foreigner and not speaking Chinese does get you some preferential treatment. So I think when I first arrived in China, it's like, it's great, I'm getting this preferential treatment for being foreign, and they're really funny because I stand out because I'm a foreigner, and this is great. I get a lot of attention, often female attention as well. But then I think after, when you've been somewhere long enough and your family are there and you've lived there for 10 years or more, I think, Seydi, you've been in China for like over 10 years, right?
No, 9.
9 years.
9. It's gonna be 10 next year. Yeah.
Okay. Well, 9's it's a long time to live somewhere and not consider it home, right? To spend, for me, I spent a third of my life living in China, and that's a long time to spend somewhere where you do not feel this is your home. And most people who, if they've spent a third of their life living somewhere, they kind of want to consider it home. But being constantly called a foreigner, although initially is great, you get to bask in this kind of status as a foreigner and reap all the rewards. But then after 10 years, you can really just start to feel homesick. It's, I'm never going to be accepted here. This is not home. I can't walk down the street without somebody pointing at me and calling me a foreigner. I can't step outside my front door without somebody just shouting foreigner at me, because that has literally happened on more times than I would care to count. So, I think it's sort of, you know, I don't know if that was the same experience for you guys.
How about you, Seydi? So, you know, talking about like the idea of acceptance and do you feel that China's your home? Do you feel that you're like accepted and you kind of it feels comfortable, or do you never quite feel that like you're in there?
Well, I think you made a very good summary of the experience, Louis, because I could just repeat what you just said. But this is one aspect of it, because this is how people here, locals, see foreigners, and it doesn't really matter if you're like, okay, from this country or that country, or you know, it's just you're not Chinese, so you're a foreigner. They call Japanese or like Koreans, we already know that everybody's a foreigner anyway, even if you're it's not even I want to say yeah, it doesn't have nothing to do with your skin color or stuff like that. But at the end of the day, yes, if you want to feel at home, it's definitely not something fun every day when you're reminded. And we have kids, so whenever I go with Nolan, even this evening I was with him, I took him to the gym, and well, we used to hear it all the time, fingers pointing at us, and oh, look at his hair, look at this, look at that, oh, he's a little foreigner, whatever, blah blah blah. So it's even more I'd say frustrating for when I look at him, because he was born in Hangzhou, the same as your kids, Louis, right? So they're like they're from Hangzhou, and they're Chinese, and you still have people around, you know, pointing fingers at them and looking at them in a funny way. Sometimes it's just wow, look at him, he's so awesome, he's so cute, he's so this, he's so that. But you still have, it doesn't matter what it is that people say, it's just that you still have comments anyway, and we just want to live your life. So I guess, yeah, this is kind of it's definitely sorry,
it leaves a sense of like otherness. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of, there's all, I think it's a wall that you can't get over, where it's always like the Chinese and then other people. And after 5 years, I just thought that could never be broken. And I know you guys were there a lot longer, but it's kind of,
yeah,
I realized that it would never be accepted.
Yeah, it's the Middle Kingdom.
Yeah, yeah. It's like
the Middle Kingdom. It's the center of the world.
Yeah.
Yes. I do have an interesting point to add to that, because I think what you said about sort of talking about like, you know, whether people like, you know, because it isn't just like Chinese and other people, because the word foreigner, they do tend to really apply it more to people that look different to them. So it's not even like a kind of like a political or national classification a lot of the time. It's just you look different, so you're a foreigner. The example I have is like, I was working in a primary school. This is like going back 5 years ago in Shanghai, and they had in the class, it was there were 2 kids in this school who were actually like mixed race. So they're, you know, one parent was Chinese and the other parent was I think one of them was American. But they look a bit different. But actually, because their mum's Chinese, they speak Mandarin. It's their first language.
Yeah.
And they were born in this country, and they're in a Chinese school. They're not in an international school, which means they've got Chinese citizenship. So their mum's Chinese. Their first language is Mandarin. You know, both these kids like could really not speak much English. I think one of them was Russian anyway, so I'm not sure how good his Russian was. But certainly the kid who was like half, who's, I think his dad was American, couldn't really speak much English. His first language is Mandarin. He's born in China. His mum's Chinese. He's lived here presumably all his life. They're like 7 years old. And the other kids in the class called them the foreigner. It's like, oh, the foreigner, the foreigner. And I'm thinking, he's really not a foreigner. He's as Chinese as any of you. He just looks a bit different. I mean, well, you know, obviously, I guess culturally, you know, his dad was American, but you know, realistically, like, you shouldn't really be calling him a foreigner. I don't think he is really a, you know, a foreigner. But the really interesting thing was there was one kid in the class who at first I thought he had like learning difficulties because they don't really explain this stuff. When you know, I think I was only in there like one day a week anyway, and they didn't explain this stuff to me. At first I just thought he was really slow, maybe he had learning difficulties because he didn't really respond much in Mandarin or in English to anything. And then I later found out that well, the student said to me, like, oh no, because I kept trying to speak to him in Mandarin because I just thought, you know, I'm supposed to be there doing my once a week English class, but he's just not responding at all. So I'm trying to speak to him Mandarin, and the kids say, oh, he doesn't understand Chinese, doesn't understand Mandarin. So I'm thinking, like, what is he from? Like Guangdong or something? Is he? You know, surely, you know, a kid can't be living in Shanghai and not know Mandarin, like. That, you know, and be like, you know, in the first grade or second grade at school. Anyway, it turns out I actually finally like took a look at his notebook, his school notebook, and it was Korean writing inside. Mm-hmm. This kid was Korean. His parents were both Korean, obviously over there, like working for whatever reason, and he was in this school. And this kid was actually a foreigner. He was not Chinese. He didn't speak the language. He can, you know, he's written his name in Korean on the front of his textbooks, and he's just got some Korean writing scrawled inside. But, you know, it's not, this kid was actually a foreigner, and they did not call him a foreigner. They just said he doesn't speak Chinese. But the kid who was Chinese, but his dad was American, but was in every sense Chinese, they called him a foreigner repeatedly and told me, oh, he's a foreigner. And I just found that fascinating that actually, you know, in this situation, clearly what counted was the appearance of looking foreign, not actually whether you were Chinese or not.
I think it does. The optics of it and how you look is actually a big part of it, because when I've had this conversation with Chinese people, they often say, oh no, we call everyone like Weigoren, like a foreigner. But it turns out, and I've done classes on this before, if you do, if you've got pictures of Japanese or Korean or someone that's ethnically close to Han Chinese, they're more reluctant to say it, and they really are. So I think it's like when the optics of it become very obvious that someone's a foreigner, they just call someone the foreigner, that they look different. It's this idea of the other, you know, this otherness. I used to start off sometimes when I introduce myself to a new class, and these are adults, by the way, like, you know, university students or businessmen or whatever. I would sometimes crack a joke and I would say, guess where I'm from. I tell them my name, I guess where I'm from. And a lot of it, and then they'd say, oh, you're from America, you're from Australia. I'd say, no, you're from England, no. And then, where are you from? I say, I'm from China. And they'd be like, ah, like the whole room would just, every time would just laugh up. Don't be ridiculous, you're not from China. But then I would turn it round and I'd say to him, do you think that we could do that same joke in America? Do you think I could do that? That would still be funny in America or still be funny in Europe when we say it? And they get a bit quiet and a bit confused. And I would say, you know, that's because you can look different and your nationality, you can still be accepted within a country. And some people, some of the students, you could see it made them think a bit, and other students just had nothing to do with it. They were just like, no, you know, you'd never be Chinese. You're just being ridiculous. So I think it runs deep. I think it definitely runs deep in China. Do you think there's any sign of it changing, or where do you think it's come from, and do you think it can change, Seydi? Or
say again?
Where do you think this has come from? Why do you think they're so protective over this Chinese identity? Why can't like a foreigner be Chinese? Have you ever thought about it, or?
I'd say just because there is not much exchange with other countries. I mean,
still isolated.
I mean, exchange in the sense where people maybe come here and stay for work, but they don't have a life here. Most of the foreigners I've known, or I only know a few that are actually living in China for like more than, say 10 years, 14, 15, 20 years. I know one person who stayed in China for 20 years. So people come here, work, get busy for a few years or something like this, and then they just go back. I'm not saying that it's because they don't want to stay or whatever. It's just in the end, it's kind of a fact. I don't know the numbers on this one. It's just people I know around.
Yeah, people.
And yeah, I guess it's a mix of everything. The fact that people come here, want to have some kind of experience here, see what China is like, and also spend some time, also try to get some work, maybe end up married with kids. That's also part of the story for some people, right? And then some people stay, but most of them just go back at some point. And I think it's maybe because their experience in China was maybe enough for them. And also because of what we're talking about right now, the fact that you're reminded every day that you are not, you're not from here, which makes you not feel comfortable. Either if they say it in a polite way, I don't think there's a polite way for that. I mean, it's just in a way where people don't really think about the consequences of that, just pointing fingers all the time, saying, hey, you're a foreigner, look at your hair, blah, blah, blah. When it's between them, this is how they grew up, this is how they do it. But for people from outside, it's not the same. So I guess, yeah, a mix of all that. It's kind of it's not easy for people to decide and say, okay, I'm gonna stay here.
Yeah, I mean that's it. It's like maybe more foreigners would stay, and we say foreigners if there wasn't that wall of being separated. I mean, it's certainly something that I thought about, whether to stay long term in China, and raise a family like you guys have had to think about. And it is really, the two big things were thinking about the education system and just this persistent feeling that, you would never be fully accepted. That's the feeling that I had, that, you would have this constant thing of being pointed as the other. And when I was thinking about children having kids, I didn't really know if it was a good idea to put my kids through that. Maybe it would make them tougher, maybe that it's actually a good thing for your kids in the long run. But I mean, I don't know. Louis, do you think is this one of the reasons maybe that you kind of left China, or did it play a factor?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's, I could have stayed in China a bit longer, but I think it's not, I say it's not fair. I mean, that's for every parent in their own situation to kind of make that judgment. But for me, the situation I was in with my kids, I thought it was unfair to leave them in living in a country where they were born and they're growing up and they speak the language and it's their first language, but they're not actually considered that it's home. But I don't think this is necessarily anything unique to China. I'm sure there are, less cosmopolitan parts of, Britain or America that, if you look different, you stand out, then people think you're not from around here, particularly sort of more rural areas. I think just what's surprising in China is that you can have really large cities that are real, the majority of the population are actually migrants, not from other countries, but from other parts of China at least. And they still point at you and you're like, you're the foreigner. One I always love throwing back at them is if I can hear they're not from Hangzhou from their accent. If they call my kid a foreigner, I say, no, he's from here. He's a local. You're an outsider. In Chinese, they would say, 本地人 and 外地人. So when they point at my kid, I'm like, oh, 他是外国人. I'm like, no, 他是本地人, 你是外地人. It's like, you're the outsider. He's from here. He was born here.
Well, your Chinese is very, very good. And a few times I remember you saying that you've really perplexed some of the the people when you speak, they ask you if you're a Uyghur as well, don't they? Because they're like, well, you're not Han Chinese, but you're speaking very good Chinese. Like, what?
No. So this was this was I think you're confusing a couple of different anecdotes there, but one of them with the Uyghur guy was so I was queuing up to buy some of the naan bread that they sell from this oven, and he looked at me and he said to me in Chinese, he was like, "Oh, are you Han Chinese?"
Right.
And I was like, "No, of course I'm not Chinese." And he said to me, he's like, 我也不是汉族人. He's like, I'm not Han Chinese either. And because he's Uyghur, like, he can't call himself a foreigner, right? The Han Chinese surrounding him would probably murder him if he referred to himself as not Chinese, because we all know Xinjiang has been part of China for quote unquote 5,000 years exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, it's less than 200, but we won't get into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's sort of interesting how he was kind of like sort of trying to kind of like say, you and I, we're both the same. We're both not Chinese, but he can't actually say he's not Chinese. So he says, we're both not ethnically Han. But that was an interesting. That was interesting that he kind of like felt acutely aware of that in Hangzhou as well. And I think in some ways, like, he probably didn't get, as a Uyghur, he probably didn't get the benefits of being a foreigner that we got, but he probably got all the disadvantages of being a foreigner. He's not accepted. He's not from there. People will take the piss out of the way that you speak Mandarin to your face quite happily in China. Before you even open your mouth, they will basically take the piss out of your accent or the way that you speak. And he gets that as well. They do that. The Han Chinese, and they do it to other Han Chinese people as well. So I'm not saying it's necessarily a racial issue, but they do it to other Han Chinese people if they're from other parts of China. They do love to kind of criticize people's pronunciation. But yeah, that was it was interesting that he clearly did not feel like sort of welcomed or having spoken to him, like he didn't feel like he was at home in Hangzhou or he could make Hangzhou his home. He was always going to be an outsider.
Yeah. I haven't actually spoken to a few. I had a student who was actually half Russian, and his dad was from Wenzhou, and he was actually well liked in the school. He came to the adult school because he was like 21. But he would tell me, that it was very difficult growing up in China. He always felt very ostracized. But he could speak Spanish actually very well. His father had a business in Panama, so he's quite an interesting guy. He said it was a very difficult growing up in the public school system. So how about like this? I suppose when we're talking about prejudice, then like you need to look a bit more about how deep does this go. Like I suppose we have to look at a bit more about race as well and profiling. It's a sensitive subject. I'm sure you guys, especially if when we're recording and I'm having to put stuff on YouTube, because I think the idea of this is that we upload a lot of this to YouTube in the end. But I think East Asia in general, so Japan and China, do you think that there's a general racism in East Asia, but maybe not a sinister racism, more ignorance? And either one, I mean, Seydi, you can answer that question, or you can intersperse it with anecdotes, or do you think there's like a degree of prejudice there? Have you seen anything that kind of affects you?
I'd say that when people, there's definitely discrimination. Now, either is good or bad, because I've been in a situation, I'm going to start with that one. I think it was a few weeks ago. I was taking the subway, and I was with Nolan. So both of us are going into the subway. And then I see a police squad, whatever. I mean, they were checking IDs. And I could hear them before I even got to them. And back, we're again talking about this, like, oh, look, foreigners, what do we do? Because they were checking on Chinese ID, right? But then, boom, a foreigner pops out with his son. So just, okay, you're a foreigner. Now, how do I deal with you? And then they just couldn't figure it out. So it looks, I think it was the boss over there who was doing he was like, just pass, because he doesn't know what to do. Even if he gets the info, maybe they're just looking for Chinese ID.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have that box where he can check a passport, or maybe, I don't know, a working permit or whatever. I don't know. It's just like, it was obvious that he wasn't looking for foreigners or whatever. It's not even in the box or something at some point. So that was in this situation, I'd say, well, it's good in the sense where it's gonna save me like a few seconds or minutes, depending on if I have my ID or not on me. And then I just went through, and everybody else was like, stop here, just because they're Chinese. So yeah, that's one aspect of it. The other one is just, I think people around the world, I'd say I start with that, because now with what's going on in the US, it's quite crazy. Yeah. So basically, being black is always, or colored, because I'm half white. Now, I don't see myself as a black person. I don't see myself as a white person. I am both. So for some people, it's just not even conceivable. Some people can't even get into that kind of, way of thinking. Yeah. So, well, yeah, just the fact that I'm colored, I'd say, yeah, people say, I can hear some stuff here and there, and I know that people have like some kind of idea of what black people do or whatever. So basically, it's black people come from Africa, and it's so messy or whatever in Africa. Either it's war or it's whatever, this and that. So they're trying to come here in China and do some business, but they can't behave. And basically, they just make a big mess here, and people don't want them here. And when I say people, it's Chinese people don't want black people doing some bad stuff here in China. This is the feeling that I've had from the beginning here, and I still have it now. So I hope one day it's going to change, because people don't even understand that you don't only have black people in Africa. Yeah. And some African countries are not, how would you say, are not, I'd take Senegal for an example, because I'm half Senegalese. So there is no war right now in Senegal. It's quite stable political system, and everything is quite stable. And people actually do have a life, and they work and they do things, and it's not what people think about whenever they think about Africa. Now, this is it. Yeah, basically people will say, oh, you're black, you're from Africa, and probably there's some bad, connotation. I don't know if you can say connotation, but bad stereotype. And then they don't see all the other group of people trying to do some good stuff, actually providing work for Chinese people, because I started a company here in China, and I'm recruiting Chinese staff. So I have Chinese people working for me, and they have a job because I created a job for them. So all that stuff, all of that, people don't see it. So and then also they can figure out that you might be American, or a lot of people actually still like that. Thankfully, we know other people that are that can level with us, and they have traveled the world, and they know more than just whatever is broadcasted on television or on social medias and stuff. So, but it is what it is.
Well, I actually think that Kobe and the NBA is helping China. Well, I mean, it's unfortunately Kobe's passed away now, but I think it's helping China break down a few stereotypes of boundaries and things like that. You get a lot of young Chinese guys idolizing NBA players, which is a positive thing. They're seeing them in a different light. But I think you're right with even when it comes to their prejudice and stereotypes of of Africa and Africans specifically. That's part of the problem. What happened in Guangzhou, you know, is that actually the Americans, the Americans got involved because they were also profiling Black Americans, because they just thought everyone was African, and then several Black Americans were having some trouble in Guangzhou, and then I think the American consulate got involved a bit hush hush, and they were like, look, you know, what's going on here. But I mean, the Guangzhou situation was crazy, and I think that did really shine. It brought to the surface a lot of stuff that happens in China. I mean, I didn't realize until a couple of years ago, till a student told me, and he said in Chinese what it was when I was talking about the African diaspora living in Guangzhou, that the Chinese actually call it chocolate town. Chocolate city? Did you know that? That's what they actually say in Chinese, and I was quite shocked about that. But I'm not surprised. I think because your Chinese is very good, Seydi. So I mean, we don't want to get into where we're telling tales on the Chinese. I don't want this just to be like pointing fingers at them and to say, you know, everyone's racist and we're going to point fingers at them. But there is a kind of a bit we do need to talk about. Do you hear comments? Because your Chinese is very good. Have you generally kind of overheard stuff, or is it just a feeling, or is it just verified? Because they can be very upfront to their language, right? It's very direct, their language a lot. Well, yeah, I would say it's pretty direct, their language.
Yeah. So, like I said, people just talk to your face, oh, look at this guy, and whatever they can talk. But I want to say something else again about like what you mentioned about the NBA and Kobe and everything. Yeah, this is good. I mean, this is great. Yeah. So Black people have a box where they're actually like, great. They're good at sports. They're good at basketball. They're good at football. They're good at whatever. But this is good in a way where you actually have a platform for these people, right? But then it's also very limiting. That's all they can do. And me, one of the reasons why I can do what I do, and I can probably do it better. It's not just my Chinese, but it's also the way I look. And this is sometimes when I think about it, I'm just like, well, you know, it's kind of hard to process, because lots of people will look like, oh yeah, look at him, just the package, you know?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, American football. Oh yeah, and now because of my hairstyle and everything. And also I lift some weight, so people, when they look at me, they know that I spend some time in the gym. They know that I'm around sports, even if I don't say it. You can tell. So this box, it's good, and I'm sure it gave me opportunities here in what I'm doing. But the thing is, it doesn't mean that that's all I can do.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean?
But mate, the thing is in China, and I think me and Lewis can pay testament to that, you kind of, in order to succeed, you need to play into their stereotypes. It's kind of a bit of a sellout, you know what I mean? And it's not, but you can't change it from the outside. It's like the old saying, like, you need to be on the inside to change it. So you need to kind of use whatever road to get inside that you can. Yeah. And it is a land of generalizations and stereotypes, China. Perhaps it is going to change, and and it's other countries and other cultures went through this many years ago. But yeah, you're right. I mean, look, I've been in some very delicate situations with recruiting teachers, and again, I don't want to get where I'm kind of pointing fingers at the Chinese and destroying some trust that maybe or that certain Chinese have said to me, or colleagues and so forth. But it'd be quite easier to give a person of color a job as a basketball teacher rather than an English teacher. You know what I mean? And the schools request this. I get pieces of paper from schools with profiling of people on there, something that is pretty much illegal in other countries. And something that I try to stay clear of. But once you open up the door, you realize that this goes quite deep, right to the very top. And I think me and Lewis, as English teachers, you know, it wasn't unheard of, and it still isn't unheard of for people to get different salaries depending on how they look like. Lewis, would you say? I mean, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I've not been looking at English teaching jobs in China for quite a few years now, but I do remember even last time when I was looking for jobs, about 6 years ago, and particularly for like, summer camp jobs, I'd literally seen adverts where it says salary this much if you're a native speaker, a little bit less if you're not a native speaker, a little bit less again if you're black.
Yeah.
Pretty much in those words.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just, like you say, it's something that'll just be illegal. And in China, it's, they think that's, they think that's okay. Like, and if you ask them about it, they genuinely, they just do not see what's wrong with that a lot of the time. They do, like, even Chinese people who can speak English, whose English is quite good, maybe even studied abroad, and you think these people are more worldly, they're more, they're not close, they're not sort of from some rural area and they didn't even finish middle school or anything like that. These are people, sort of intelligent, educated people living in a cosmopolitan city, and you ask them and they still, some of them just don't understand what's wrong about that.
Yeah.
It's not all Chinese people. I'm sure, I mean, 1.4 billion people, there's certainly a huge number of people that do understand and would say that's absolutely wrong. But I think the proportion is definitely not as high as it is in, most countries in Europe or like North America. But yeah, I got a question for Seydi, because you were born in Senegal, right? But you're mixed race. Your mum's French, your dad's Senegalese. Yeah. So you like grew up in Senegal as sort of like mixed race. How does that compare to Nolan being half Chinese growing? Do you feel like he's like got a similar experience to you as a child, or is it quite different?
I'd say it's kind of the same for some things. I mean, basically, family-wise, we have the same values. The way I was raised, I have the same values in the way how I'm raising Nolan as being mixed. But then in just interacting with people, I definitely have or see more comments about the fact that he's different in China here. Now, in Senegal, people will also point at you, or just you will hear whenever you are white, you're not local. Now they might, it's more a black and white thing, because most of the people are black, obviously, living in Senegal, right? So they'll point out white people around. They'll say it all the time, in the same way where for them, like, you don't even see Asian people. I mean, I'm talking about when I was growing up in Senegal. So you'd have like maybe one or two restaurants, one Chinese restaurant and one maybe Japanese restaurant. That's it. And those were the only like kind of Asian people that you would see. And I lived in the capital, so you don't really see nothing else than black or white. You might see one Asian here and there, and then it's like, whoa, it's very like rare. So in this sense, it's kind of the same, but again, it's another continent. People will point out, my mom is white. Okay, maybe I need to mention that she's white, and my father is black. So whenever I would go somewhere with my mom, of course I would hear a lot of things like, oh, look at this white woman, or look at this, look at that. Yeah, I'd hear that all the time. So for me, it's kind of, I don't want to say the same, because culture-wise, it's a different continent.
Yeah.
But I definitely see some similarities, things that are like, just because you're different.
So it's not a uniquely Chinese thing then. No. That it's like in other countries. you know, it happens. So yeah, I think I was sort of just wanting to check, because it can sound like we're being quite critical of the Chinese here, saying they're not accepting, or you know, they
you heard
they
me.
don't,
You heard
you know,
me. I am talking about Senegal. I grew up in Senegal, so
and but you know, in Senegal for you, it's sort of like a similar kind of experience of being sort of mixed race, and you know, like that, you know, you would still hear comments and people would bring that to the attention.
And sometimes whenever people would realize that I was my mom's son, they would also call me Tubab. Tubab means white person or white people. It's, I think it's Arabic. So they'd call me like this when some people realized that I was not just a kid around. I was with my mom. So yeah, I've heard comments like that. And I want to switch to France, because I lived in France for some time. Now, it'd be the same in France, in the sense where in some places people would look at me and behave in a different way because of the way I looked, because of the color of my skin. They'd behave different. Just being in a subway, metro. I don't even want to start with Paris, the city, but it is what it is. People will just you can't even make eye contact with people. I look at one person in the eyes for 2 seconds, and they just, you know, turn their head away and then start walking a little faster, especially nighttime. So it is what it is.
Well, how compared to China then? So France, like, because I mean, one of the reasons why I think this is important now is because of what's going on in America and Europe. Basically, we can call it culture wars, or we can call it whatever. It's that it's big at the minute, you know, that there's a large amount of groups, you know, they're calling for massive radical change, you know, if not like the downfall of the current systems that we have. Now, obviously, you've got to look at other systems in the world. If we're not going to have this system, and then and Europe and America are going to change their systems, then the next system to take place, logically, would be China. It's the second biggest economy. It has footprints all over the world. It has potential to become imperialistic. Now, you know, what we're saying is, if there is fundamentally a problem in the West with America, with Europe, UK and France, and then something else is going to come to take its place, then maybe we need to see, well, actually, is China any better? Or, you know, and that's why I'm kind of I think China needs to be singled out a bit more than maybe other cultures around the world, because it's kind of the next in line, you know. And if the West is so bad, then, you know, what's going to come and take its place? So would you say that your life in China, is it more, in terms of the discrimination, is it more comfortable than in France? Or is it a different dynamic? Do you think there was more prejudice in France, or?
It is not more comfortable. It is just, because here is the thing. This is another aspect that we need to put in order to understand. I was talking about the fact that if I keep my eyes on some people at night, they get scared, even if it's like 2 seconds, but because it's nighttime and crime and other things, you know, in countries, it's not the same. I think we can agree here, walking in the streets in the streets of Hangzhou here at night, you don't really have to look, or you don't have to check all the time. You're relatively safe. The only thing you want to check whenever it's crossing the road. So different levels of safety, different. It's a complete different dynamic. So in France, the reason why people would be scared of stuff or look at you in a way, it's sometimes related to just their safety. Where here in China, where I've been, at least, people are not worried about their safety whenever there is this discrimination, either positive or negative. I mean, whenever they tell you you're not from here, or you can hear it, oh, look at this guy's not from here, it's never associated, or at least in Hangzhou, I've never been to Guangzhou or other places. It's not related to the fact that something's gonna happen, or they might get robbed or whatever.
Does that make it worse or better then? Like if someone in France is maybe suspicious or prejudiced with you because they're worried about their safety, and then someone in China is just prejudiced about you for other reasons, just for ignorant reasons, does that is like one more forgivable than the other? Do you know what I mean? It's like,
I know. I don't think it's, I think it's a little different. It's a little different. It doesn't make it even. It doesn't make it, it's just that I don't know if we can compare these two.
I definitely get what you mean, because the safety aspect in China, it's people would not mind you, they do over, shall we say, Xinjiang, over what Uyghurs. So, they do have that on their radar. They do say that they're dangerous, and they will deliberately avoid Uyghur Muslims because they're convinced, that they're going to be harmed. So I think that does exist within their mentality. But I think you're right. The majority of other prejudices and stereotypes they have, it's not through a personal safety fear. I don't know. It's a weird one to try and open up, really. Okay.
I think there's another the obvious aspect to this is the fact that China is just racially so homogenous. Like we spoke in the previous weeks, it's like 95% Han Chinese or something. Like one medium-sized Chinese city probably has more Han Chinese people than the entire, ethnic Uyghur population in Xinjiang, in the whole of Xinjiang. And that's one of the larger ethnic minorities in China. So I think, I think it's just the overwhelmingly homogenous nature of Chinese people, where they are mostly Han Chinese. That's why they act the way they do when people look different, and it will become a very different dynamic when they get a large sort of immigrant population, which will happen if China's standard of living continues to increase, and they have problems with the aging population. Right? They changed the one-child policy to a two-child policy to encourage people to have more children, but they've still got a problem where people aren't having enough kids. The one-child policy, and then just the fact that as people become more affluent, they're less likely to have more children anyway. So they are going to definitely change to having a larger immigrant population in the future, I imagine.
There's also 40 million more men than women. So you're right. So if those 40 million extra men are going to breed and have children, it would have to bring in a different
right, that's
idea.
So I mean, I think in the future it's not unrealistic to say they're going to have a much larger immigrant population, and it's probably going to come from Southeast Asia, and it's probably not going to be coming from Western Europe, let's be honest. Maybe so, like Africa and Southeast Asia, and as you already said, with Guangzhou, they've already got like a fairly large sort of community there. So I think when that happens, then you'll see a real change, and whether or not that will be attitudes will change for the better, and that people are more likely to be accepted as Chinese because they're more used to seeing non-Han Chinese people who have lived and settled in China, or even been there for a generation or two. So whether it changes for the better or whether it maybe changes for the worse, and you're more likely to see the same kind of racial tensions that you get in parts of Western Europe, where they're kind of, a lot of racism in Britain is directed against what's perceived as being immigrant populations, like whether it's the, Indians and Pakistanis that came over, like in the 70s, to like more recently the Polish coming over. But like, I think in Britain, a lot of, sort of it's a lot of racism is sort of tied up with anti-immigration, and that's not really something they have in China because they don't have large immigration. but that will probably change in the not too distant future, and that will be really the telling point to judge whether or not, like, you know, how China compares to the West in terms of their sort of handling of that situation.
Yeah, so that's what I'm getting at. You know, if China could do a better job than what the West has done, I think maybe one thing that's on China's side is that they don't have the baggage, the huge baggage and moral stain of slavery. I mean, even effectively, there was African slavery that went into Asia, but not on the same scale as from into the Americas. So I think maybe that's one thing, that maybe they might be able to do it better. Maybe things will change. Maybe there might be less tension, you know, more welcoming. But I mean, I don't know. From all I can say is from my experience, you know, that it's still very much us and them, right? And it's certainly not on my part where I've been trying to push it. It's always, you know, in their language, in their approach to everything, it's still very much us and them. Seydi, what do you think? Do you think that, are you positive about the future then for China? Do you think that it can become more integrated, like more welcoming? Or do you think this is going to stick around for a long time?
I don't know. We've all witnessed the what happened with the coronavirus when it started. Like all the international medias, and when I say international, I talk about like basically everybody except China. I mean, let's say the Western world, calling the coronavirus the Chinese virus or whatever, things like this. Even I saw stuff on French medias and stuff. Well, anyway, it was all Chinese virus. And then after that, when people went back home, and then it started looking really bad in the West. In China, you had that wave of people just whenever they saw somebody looking like a foreigner, they'd be a little scared, thinking, "Oh, he might have the virus." So always checking on. It was the same at some point in the West. So in the West, it was anybody Chinese Asian looking. I saw videos and I saw plenty of posts and stuff. So discrimination.
Yeah, like people stop going to a Chinese restaurant just because they think they're going to get the coronavirus.
Or just, I saw this crazy video of people telling a group. They looked like students, university probably, and it was in Belgium, and they were asked to leave the metro. So the good thing about that video, I always remember, it's like it was two people telling them, "Okay, you've got to leave now because it's not good what's going on in China and everything." And like, we're not even Chinese or something. And then the other people were like, "You have to stop now. If you don't stop, we're gonna have you leave the train." So other people were very defensive and trying to protect these Asians, which was really good. Now it was the same at some point here in China after some time. So whenever you would go somewhere, just because I looked different, they would just, "Okay, stop right there, show me all your papers, show me all your it's everything." The QR code, the health QR code is on Alipay, and then they have to check this, blah blah blah. So it was basically, even until today, whenever I have to go to a new place I've never been before, it can be a residential area, it can be whenever you have to register first if they've never seen you in the system, and it goes for everybody. But when you're a foreigner, you hear it all the time. "Oh, where are you from? Where did you come from? Were you in China the past few days or months and whatever?" Then I have to show a ton of papers. I have to show a ton of stuff. So I don't even remember what was the question.
We were talking about the change. If you think it could change, we could lose some of the xenophobia.
Right.
Or
So this, I don't know, with the way the world looks right now, I really hope it's gonna change for in a good way, right? But right now you can't tell, because I don't know. I know that locally here in Hangzhou, for example, they are helping foreigners to get their resident, not permits,
Permit,
but
yeah. Oh.
green card, basically green card.
Oh yeah.
So there is this effort by the Hangzhou government to attract foreigners that have some, they're good at one specific thing, and they want to attract people here. Maybe they want to compete against Shanghai in some way. I believe they want to make Hangzhou very attractive and attract some talent from within the foreigners, I believe.
Yeah, international talent. Yeah.
International. Yeah. So there is, I can see it, and I see the effort by the Chinese Hangzhou local government to attract foreigners here, to make Hangzhou more attractive and more international.
Yeah.
Now,
that's true. Yeah, I think that in terms of wanting to attract foreign talent, but I mean, the thing is with this, there's a lot of undercurrents with it. I mean, again, the political angle is that they want a transfer of skills, knowledge that comes from outside, from America, from Europe, and then bring it into China to help China grow, which is fair enough. That's what every country does. And I think that with the problem is with the xenophobia, like it's turned on and on with the nationalism. So if it gets politicized and like the party has a problem with America, or they have a problem with Japan, a problem with Europe, they turn on the tap of propaganda, which is what we've talked about before. And then everyone starts getting this national rhetoric about China's great, America's bad, Europe's bad. So they turn it on and off when they want. I mean, with the COVID thing, the outbreak in Beijing, they traced it back to a food market. And then they said that food market was salmon, pretty much the only foreign imported food that was available in the food market was being a salmon.
Right.
So, they're not going to say it's from a Chinese national dish, or it was imported locally. They have to choose something that's very obviously foreign in order for people to blame the foreigners. So there was a big boycott of salmon and so forth. So I think the politics could stop a lot of it. I think if people were allowed to interact naturally, as with anything in life, right? People break down walls and they become friendly, and they learn what's inside of each other. They realize that just face-to-face interaction is the best thing. But I think when the politicians are involved and the things get politicized, it could push relations back a long way. It might take a lot longer. Lewis, do you know what I mean by that, Lewis?
Yeah, I was thinking something similar, because I think the thing with China is I feel like the government could be a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, they have the power to really push through change when they want to. And, if there was instances of, like in America, you have the issue with like the police and, the sort of, certain police forces believe there's, maybe sort of like ingrained sort of, racism or whatever. I mean, I don't know much about it, but let's say if that were the case in China, the government would have the power to very quickly just say, these people are fired, and they're all disappearing to a jail somewhere and you won't hear from them again. And if they really want to, the Chinese government do have a massive amount of power to, shape through their education system, through the media, which they control very strictly, the way that people think. So if the government really, if there were a problem with, racism that was bottom up, that was like, kind of like and the government wanted to change that, they really could, more effectively than I think the American government would be able to, or most sort of Western democracy would be able to. But I think the problem is, the other side of that is, if there were a problem and it was not convenient for the government to accept that problem, they could also make that problem vanish from the news, from the media. So the whole Black Lives Matter movement could never take off in China, because the idea of people protesting about and being unhappy with a social issue is, that's something for the government to deal with top down, and they wouldn't let people take things into their own hands and protest and demand a change, that would very quickly be, I mean, well, you know, protesting on a large scale, they would all be arrested, if not worse, right? So
the other thing in this is that I don't think that actually the government know the rules, so to speak. I mean, you say that they do have the power where they could maybe change perceptions or eradicate racism or prejudice at some point, but I think they've tried. Like a couple of years ago on the Spring Gala, they wanted to create this big friendship with Africa, and it was the whole theme of the Spring Gala. Do you remember this in 2018, I think? And
they had the woman sort of dressed up, and she had like
blackface.
Blackface, and she had like a fake bum on and stuff.
Yeah, and they just went into loads.
Okay, I remember that one.
And this is the Spring Gala, and the Spring Gala, this is vetted at the very highest levels, right? And so it became apparent to me that actually they don't know the rules. You know, this idea of like in the West we have this wokeness and consideration of language to be careful about appropriation. It's a very rich tapestry. You know, people have thought about this for a long time, and I think China started to try and get involved, and because it's so new to them, they were like, "Oh, we actually don't know what the fuck we're doing." It's kind of like we thought we were doing a good thing. Like they generally thought that blackfacing up a load of actors and playing into stereotypes of Africans was like a positive thing. So I think they may
showing an acceptance of Africa. Yeah, they thought they were doing that.
I think maybe they took a step away from it because, you know, that they're unsure how to play it, or even if they wanted to do it, I'm not sure if they have the experience and the kind of the gentle understanding of like how to integrate, you know, how for people to be one. I don't know, Seydi, did you see that thing with the gala?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. And from an I'd say from an African point of view, it's not a big deal for me.
Yeah.
If you'd see it from maybe an Afro-American, and then I don't know, I'm not in an Afro-American shoes to tell what it is like, but there is this history of blackface or whatever. So from a different culture, from a different point of view, might look different for me. If I look at it from an African point of view, it's just trying to have make some fun, but not in a bad way, and trying to, you know, do maybe they couldn't find, or maybe they didn't want to take the risk to have an actual real African on stage, or maybe politically it's too, I don't know, you know, sensitive or whatever, so they couldn't do it, have a real person there, so they decided to have an actor, or maybe they just couldn't find a guy who could do the job and, you know, play it the way they wanted to play it or whatever. I don't know. You've got many different levels or, you know, layers, but in the end, I did not see it offensive as from an African point of view. I don't think it's offensive. And
the first call outs of it, I remember were coming from the Afro-American side of things. I think it was when it was brought up in the foreign newspapers. So there are, right, so there's differences within like black communities around the world. There's different perceptions of like what is considered okay, you know, what is considered offensive. So I think that maybe China, and I think not just China, but other countries, especially in East Asia, like Korea and Japan, they maybe look at kind of how delicate things are in the West and in America, and you know how complicated things can be. And I think that maybe they kind of don't want to get involved. I think, you know, I get the feeling with China that they kind of think that they've got bigger problems or bigger things to worry about. You know what I mean? You know, China is still busy, you know, trying to secure its borders, trying to get rid of the COVID thing and, you know, avoid blame for that, and, you know, trying to grow its economy. Well, the rest of the Western America and Australia and New Zealand, everyone's wrapped up in these culture wars. And my impression is that I don't think China wants to get involved with it, you know. But I suppose we'll see further down the line.
Yeah,
guys, have you got any? Seydi, have you got anything else to add? Because I think we've done an hour, so
yeah, I'm gonna have to
just one.
Okay, one thing. Go on.
Just one thing. I think about relations between Africa and China. The way I see it, and I haven't been in Senegal for quite some time, but last time I was there, there were a lot more Chinese people there. They're investing a lot in Africa, and I just from the most simple way of seeing things, China and the Western world, as in Europe or the US, Africans don't see China the same way at all, because I'm back in history at some point, and it was a Chinese taxi driver who told me that one day. I didn't even know about that, because we were in the taxi, we were talking and everything, and at some point he asked, okay, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Senegal. He was like, oh, okay. And he said, I want to thank you personally, and as a nation, I also want to thank you, because China wouldn't be where it is right now if it wasn't for African countries that were already part of the United Nations, and they helped China to get a seat there.
Yeah.
So that is very strong, and I had no clue about that. And at that time, I was like, oh, okay. So he actually said thank you, basically, thank you for helping us being where we are now. And there'll always be this friendship kind of between African countries and China, which is not. It's more of we're trying to help each other, because we all started from the bottom, and we've been at war with the Western world.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know.
Where there is no direct conflict. In the future, everything is about money and win-win business. It's all about business now. But there is no direct conflict where people were fighting against each other. It was war or slavery or whatever, and taking your land and this and that. Between those two continents, and or even if there was at some point, I don't know much about it. So the relationship between those, Africa and China, is more of a working together, and we started from the bottom, and I have your help. I'll help you get better at whatever you want to get better at. And they want to do it together, kind of.
I agree.
It's not the same.
That's definitely the perception. It's like it's more of an equal partnership, right? It's a mutual partnership. I think we have to see how this plays out, because you often hear the win-win, the win-win relationship. A lot of the time, you have to be a bit careful when you hear that, because usually when people say win-win relationship, one person is getting more than the other, So
no, we all know that, and some countries we can talk about that another time. But in Africa, it's already not win-win at all. We already know who's winning. We know who's not. So it's But just the feeling about it, because what you said about this and that blackface, which is, for me, it's not blackface, because I don't know what blackface is. It doesn't exist in my culture. It doesn't exist in France, from what I remember. And it definitely doesn't exist in Senegal. So this is an American thing, or at least I don't know it the same way. So just talking about that one, for me, it was, okay, they have no other way to do it, so they're going to do it like this. And whatever. It's, I didn't find it offensive.
Cool. All right, cool. All right. Well,
good time with you guys.
Yeah, we see what the future holds. All right. I'm going to...
Yeah. Hopefully it's going to get better.
The recording.